Hayes decided that this would become this year's Shabbat would be Refugee Shabbat would take place on Parshat Tisa, the Parsha of tomorrow morning's Torah reading. The Parsha, the portion of the Torah that deals most centrally with the question of idolatry, the question of scaling heights at Sinai only to fall precipitously in the realities of the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. I think that the lessons of what it means to be a refugee and what is the issues of refugee status and immigration are not very clearly represented by tomorrow morning's reading. But I'd like to take a journey with you that will take us back to the 4th century and take us to the end of tomorrow morning's reading to understand a little bit of the depth of what I think happens when we have conversations about ger, about immigrants, and about quote-unquote others, in order to really take a journey into the story and to paint a picture for you of what it looked like to those who read the Torah, who read the Bible, our sacred literature, who were not literate in Hebrew, who were not those who grew up in the mores and in the structures of Torah, of Bible, for those who lived outside of the Hebrew-speaking world, or those who read the Torah in its original. If one wanted to understand sacred writ, one would turn to the Septuagint and some other Greek translations that satisfied most of the ancient world. But as the turn towards the Roman Empire expanded the reach of Torah, of the Bible, a need for a Bible not in the Greek, but in the lingua franca of the majority of the Church of Rome, right? The majority of Western Christians who didn't speak Greek, but spoke Latin. That need was met. That need was met by an ambitious man named Jerome, who later became Saint Jerome. He made it his mission to faithfully translate the Greek translation of the Torah into Latin. It later became known, the translation became known as the Vulgate, which meant the popular or the popularized version of the Torah, of the Bible. And he labored over it for 15 years, from 390 of the Common Era till 405 of the Common Era. This masterpiece became the authoritative Catholic edition of the Bible, a status that it retains to this day. When Jerome, Saint Jerome, came to tomorrow morning's Torah portion, to the latter part of the chapter 34 of the book of Exodus, when he came to the story in the Bible where Moses descends from Mount Sinai after the destruction of the tablets with the second set of tablets, the Torah tells us that when Moses descends, ki karan or panav, verse 29 and 30 in Exodus 34, that the face of Moshe was karan or panav, that his face, panav, was or, meaning light, or with skin, which means, right, or with an ayin, which means skin. His skin was karan. When Jerome came to these verses, he faced a quandary that would have powerful impact on the future of Christendom and on the relationship between the Jews and Christianity. He had 350 places within Torah where the word face appeared. The word skin, or with an ayin, appears 85 times, but the word karan that described the face of Moshe appeared only 3 times in the Bible, and the 3 times it appeared were right here, on that spot, in the story of Moshe's return from the mountain. He had sources in other parts of the Bible that spoke to the word karan. In other places in the Torah, the word keren or karan referred to horns, referred to karnei re'em karnav, the horns of an ox or the horns of a ram horn. This was one option. There were other places, such as other places in Torah, where the Greek translation of karan was glorified, as in kavod, as in a heaviness, a beauty, a majesty. Before Jerome, in his monumental and far-reaching popular version of the Torah, were two options on how to translate that Moses's face was Karen or Karan. He had before him the literate translation, the absolute literal. His head was full of horns, or his head had horns, or the more metaphorical one, where the glory of God was made manifest through the beams of light that streamed from Moshe's face. When Jerome came to translate that term, he had a choice. And that choice would lay out before him how future generations of Christians would perceive this moment in Torah. Would Moshe be perceived as one who was dignified through the glory and the light of the divine that shone from his face? Or would Moshe be one who had horns? Now, for most Hebrew readers, having horns in this way might just speak to a certain majesty, a certain glorified quality. But certainly Jerome, as many scholars have pointed out, and in particular in the writings of Stephen Bertman in his paper on this, it wasn't lost on Jerome that the word horn or Karen appears 9 times in the book of Revelations. It wasn't lost on Jerome that to depict Moses, someone who represented the Old Testament, the Torah that was being replaced by Jesus and the New Testament, and to demonize him and to take his dignified divine glow and instead place in its place a demonic version, a version of Moses that would depict him as slightly satanic, would go a long way towards expressing a hatred that he had towards the Jew. In the writings of Bertman, he writes, for Saint Jerome, the translation spoke to a choice between dignity and hatred. And Jerome chose hatred. What later became Michelangelo's horned Moshe in the Sistine Chapel spoke of a translation that was lost. And what was lost in translation was the profound dignity and beauty of Moshe's revelation at Sinai, and what spoke through his face as the epitome of what a human being could become and could be was hidden behind a grotesque hatred and accusation that then became the bedrock of an anti-Semitic Middle Ages and so on and so on. Jerome had a choice. Jerome had a choice to choose one way or the other, to recognize that translation from the holy rays to the horned, from the dignified divine to the demonic and degraded, would have implications that would be far-reaching. This choice between how we translate reality, whether we choose one or the other, one frame to use vis-a-vis whom we meet, is at the core, I think, of a conversation about how we speak about those who come to seek shelter, those who come to seek safety, those who come knocking on our doors, those who are searching to be free, and to whom we lift the lamp beside the golden door. What is lost in translation all too frequently is a projected hatred, an a priori understanding of the other as dangerous, as threatening. That a priori, that what we bring to the story, the way that we bring it, the ways that we choose an implausible over a plausible, the ways that we feed into fears as opposed to quieting them with the rational and with evidence, with data, and fundamentally with our belief that in every human being there is the light of the divine that shines from their face. That to me is at the core of a conversation about us as a people, this community, and this broader American community as a nation. We have been living over the last 4 years, though this past administration is by no means the only one that targeted refugees and others who were seeking asylum. We were living with the very epitome of a cruelty that was founded on lies about the other. seeing in them not the dignified, but the demonic. Lies that defaced them, that deformed them, that denigrated and denuded the divine dignity that each human being bears. We've lived in a lie that allows us to turn away from them with policies that did not protect their children, that separated them, that didn't seek to offer them safety and solace, but rather to turn them back. We are soaked in mistranslations like these, lost translations that have colored and have blinded us in our daily encounters with those who have come seeking our refuge. We have consistently been brought before two narratives that vie for our attention, ones that cast others in the best light and those that would not. We have often responded with wisdom and clarity, but more often than we'd like to admit, we have found it difficult, if not impossible, to discern where we bring our biases, where our a priori assumption of anger and hate colors the way that we look at the world, whether we choose the holy or the horned. A refugee is a person who has been forced to flee their home country due to persecution because of either race or religion, nationality, or political opinion, or their membership in a particular group, let's say members of an LGBTQI community. The persecution of the refugee, the experience that they have, it may include harassment, threats, abduction, torture. They are often afforded legal protection by their host country's government or the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or both. But in the United States, refugees are hand-selected by the US government, and they are screened in advance. Refugees are the most vetted individuals who come to our shores. Refugees are more than likely, 82% of them are more than likely to be a part of the workforce than as opposed to 67% of those who are native born here in this country. They contribute more. They are safer than. And yet lies and lost in translation moments have been what we have been fed. In the United States, our quota in the Trump administration was down to 15,000 resettled refugees, and we're not even going to make that for this year. The lowest number in recorded history. And so as we lift up where we ourselves, many of us, not all, where we ourselves fled, we ourselves were demonized or othered, where we ourselves, as the Torah will tell us each and every Shabbat, were once gerim, we were once seen as the other, the one who was hopelessly mistranslated and missed. We have an opportunity to act, to vote for, to speak out against, and to refuse a narrative that others, to refuse a narrative that belittles, that refuses a narrative rooted in hatred that is brought into the moment. We refuse to do unto others what was so often done to us. We know better. Tomorrow morning's Torah portion not only speaks about idolatry vis-a-vis the Egel HaZahav, vis-a-vis the golden calf, but another kind of idolatry more pernicious, more insidious, and more dangerous, where we use our eyes to mistranslate a world, to buy into a lie that sees in the divine dignity a defect, and gives others permission then to denigrate that beauty, to miss it. May God give us the strength to act today, this weekend, in weeks ahead, as we continue to pull ourselves out of the crisis of conscience that is so boldly seen as a form of idolatry, to miss the other and the opportunity that we have to show great strength and great love and great power in making space. I hope that we bring it into our hearts, that we are the people of the door. We lift this lamp beside the golden door. Please rise for Vehashevota, we take it into our hearts.